So we're about to dive out to our command line, and I do emphasize that term we. It's just not me doing this. You're following along too. That's where your learning is really going to start. So we're going to look at remote access to our email. We're going to be installing Dovecot on our Ubuntu 2 system. We're going to check the IMAP-S configuration, so where our certificates are located. We'll be creating a new Linux user, but not allowing it to log on interactively to a normal shell. And we're going to be installing and testing the Mutt mail client on our Ubuntu 1. So we start off on Ubuntu 2 and then we migrate to Ubuntu 1 to test the server configuration. Okay, are you ready? Well, let's go. Now, of course, we've been seeing our email as working with our MTA, but we've been local to our system. For our remote users, we're going to have to do a little bit more work and add another service allowing remote users to connect to their mailboxes. And that's where the IMAP or IMAP-S services can come in. So we're going to go through and install using sudo apt install. I think we know that by now. And as we go through, we can add in the Dovecot and then the IMAPD service. Now, we could also go through and add in POP3 or something like that if we wanted a different level of access. With IMAP, the messages stay on the server. With POP3, the messages are delivered to the client. But here now, this will be installed and up and running. And when we go through and look at our listening TCP ports, we can see that we're listening on port 993, which is IMAP-S. Move down a little bit more, and we can see port 143, and that's our standard IMAP port. But if we connect to IMAP, in the most recent configurations, we'll be redirected through to IMAP-S. So we can connect to IMAP-S directly or through to IMAP and be redirected to the secure connection. When I go through and look at the processes holding this open, so again, we should know this now by including the option P, and we also have to run as our root account. So if I use Control and A, that moves me to the beginning of the line. Control and L moves me to the top of the screen. And when we take a look at 993, it's being held open by Dovecot. And of course, that's going to be the same for port 143, the IMAP port. So we've verified that this is up and running. But we've also said with IMAP-S, we're going to need then our public key and private key pairs set up for this. Now, there is a self-signed certificate that is set up during the installation of Dovecot. However, in an enterprise environment, I'm sure you're going to be using the certificate that's been signed by your certificate authority. So we're going to need to know where that configuration is. Rather than look at the whole configuration, we're just going to look at our SSL configuration for IMAP. So we can go through and look at just the top line. So head minus N15 should be enough, the top 15 lines from our file. And we're going to find that in our etc dovecot directory, conf.d, and looking at 10-ssl.conf. Hit the big enter key. And we can see the 15 lines, but it's really the lines that are the SSL underscore cert. So our signed certificate and our key file that are important. And it's these that we might be looking at replacing when we're working with a certificate that's been signed by our own certificate authority within our enterprise. For us, in the simple demonstrations that we are doing, this is going to be enough. Our self-signed certificate is going to work with Mutt, and we'll see that in a few moments. Managing our certificate services is not really a requirement for our Linux Foundation Certified System Administrator, so we're not going to cover it here, but we're giving you enough to get up and running with Mail. Now, another thing that could be quite common is to have users that are able just to use Mail. They don't need to log on to the shell. So we can go through and create a user. We can create their home directory, though, to be honest, they probably don't need it. But what really is needed is to set their default shell. And we're going to set it to usr bin passwd. So we're not giving them an interactive shell like bash. And we're going to create a user called Jack. Now, when Jack tries to log in, when we look at his password entry, we can see then that his default shell is going to run the passwd command. So he's going to be able to reset his password, but that's all he's going to be able to do. There's no interactive shell for Mr. Jack. And this could be quite common for our remote users. They're not going to be shell users. Of course, we need to set their initial password, and their Linux password is going to be the same password that is going to be used for their mail configuration. So we can go through and configure a password. So long as you can remember it, you can set any password for Mr. Jack. But we do also want to create the mailbox for Mr. Jack. So we can do that very easily by just sending an email message through to him. So we can run that from the command line now. I can send it as my standard user. So I'm just going to go into that echo command and echo something through to my simple mail client. So welcome to the firm, or whatever message we feel like sending. We can pipe that through to mail, and we can send it through to our Jack user. We can specify the subject. So welcome, whatever we want. Close off our quotes, hit the big enter key. So that's now initiated the mailbox for Jack. Moving across now to our Ubuntu One system, you can see the prompt changes, and we are now on the Ubuntu One system. We're going to use this as our mail client. We don't have a graphical environment, so we're just installing the Mutt mail client. But of course, there's graphical clients like Thunderbird that we could install. We could also set up web-based clients to be able to retrieve messages from the IMAP server. Once we've installed Mutt, we need to configure it, but it's configured on an individual basis. I'm in my home directory. It doesn't have to be the Jack user, but I can configure the .muttrc file. Within our new file, there are really just a couple of lines that we need to configure. So we can set our folder, which is really specifying the mailbox that we are going to. And we're going to use then the IMAP protocol. But say that's redirected through to IMAP-S by default on the latest Dovecot servers. And then I can specify the Jack account at, and then I could use the IP address, but I could also put Ubuntu 2. We know we can resolve that through DNS. And with that in place, then I just need to close off my quotes. We've got then our mailbox set. Now, within the mailbox, obviously, we can have different working directories. So these are called our spool files. So when we go through and put then our set spool file, and we're going to set the default file that we have /inbox in uppercase. So when we connect, we're going to connect as Jack. So go to Jack's mailbox. Inside of Jack's mailbox, we're going to open up the inbox. I can then run Mutt. Now, this is where we see the certificate. So we can see then the certificate belongs to Ubuntu 2. It was issued by Ubuntu 2, so it's self-signed. We can see the date of validity, so it's there for 10 years. And then finally, using the letter A, we can accept the certificate permanently, so we add it to our configuration. We're now being prompted for the password, and this is the ordinary Unix password that we set previously for the Jack account. This is where you've got to remember, what did I type? But then once you've got in, we can then see our message. We can hit enter on our message, and we can see then our welcome to the firm. So everything is as we would expect. We can use quit to quit out of the message and quit to quit out of our mail client. But look at that, and look how easy that was. We've been able to set up our IMAP and IMAP-S server and connect to it from our remote system from Ubuntu One using Mutt. We're now, though, going to return back to our slides so we might understand a little bit about creating DNS entries for our mail servers.